Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. In today's video I'm going to cover a very important topic, which is VSync, whether you should keep it on or off. And if you guys have been here on my channel enough, I have always advocated for leaving VSync on. And anytime I try to do that, I've always gotten comments about latency. I am here to prove to you with a one-to-one video comparison of everything else left the same, but just VSync on and off. And obviously the comparison will be with the system that I usually follow to get a smooth sim. It is down there in the description. There are 2 videos. It'll completely transform your sim. And if you still have questions, feel free to join my Discord, and I pretty much reply to all the questions that come my way on my Discord. 2 things that we look at is how VSync is helping me, and it can help you in your flight sim experience. And the second part is why the latency that you're getting from VSync is not important. So let's talk about the latency part first, and then I'll show you guys the visual difference that VSync brings to your sim. So now, to understand latency, we need to look at this diagram. We need to understand the whole render pipeline. What exactly is latency? So the latency is the time difference between when you just gave an input with your peripheral. So that can be your mouse, your keyboard, your joystick. For flight sims, it can be your throttle quadrant, anything. And when the display is actually able to show that response to you. Now in between that, you have all of these components that are processing that input and pushing it to the display. So you have your CPU, which is doing all the calculations and deciding how everything should look like, flight dynamics and whatnot, doing all of that. It is then the render thread inside the CPU is then submitting that information to the render queue, which is where the frames get queued for GPU to render, okay? And then GPU renders all of that. So VSync latency, the latency that VSync causes, lies somewhere in this render latency zone, okay? You don't need to get into a lot of detail here, just in general, understand how the render pipeline works, okay? There's some latency that comes from just CPU processing. There is some latency that will be coming from the render thread, which you would have seen in developer mode on Msfs. There's some latency that will come from the GPU rendering the frames. Now, coming to the latency that VSync brings. So this is a calculation of VSync added input lag by refresh rate. It is a very simple calculation. You can just ask ChatGPT to do this calculation for you and it will do it for you. So it calculates the average VSync added lag and the worst case VSync added lag. So why do you have average and worst case? Because the best case will always be 0. Okay, so you'll see that the average is basically an average of 0 and 16 or whatever the worst case scenario is. The worst case scenario would be the one where GPU will have to wait for one full refresh cycle to show that next frame. Okay, now if you look at these numbers, right, let's say you're doing 60 FPS, you have a really low end system and you're only able to get like 20-25 FPS, and then you're frame genning it with lossless to somewhere around 60 FPS, and then you have turned on VSync. So along with all that CPU and GPU latency that you already have, you're now adding an average of 8.33 milliseconds of latency. This is a very small number, by the way, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. Now, as you go higher, I've worked with folks who have, I would say, a medium end system. They're still able to get 30 FPS with like medium settings. Now, if you can get 30 FPS on medium settings, that means you can run your monitor at 90 Hertz, because 30 multiplied by 3 is 90. So frame genning it by 3x will mean that now you're getting 90 FPS stable in your sim, and you're able to match it with the 90 Hertz refresh rate. And look at the reduction in VSync added lag already comes to just going from 60 Hertz to 90 Hertz. And as you go higher, for example, I run it at 120 Hertz. So I lock my base frames to 40 and then multiply that by 3. So I get 120 FPS. For me, the VSync lag worst case scenario is 8.33. Just to show you guys how small these numbers are, I was like, hey, is 10 millisecond lag, which would be added if you're running 100 Hertz, which I thought that most of the people can run at 100 Hertz and most of the people can get 33.33 FPS base, which multiplied by 3 will be 100. So I was like, hey, is 10 millisecond added lag noticeable in flight sim at 100 Hertz and 100 FPS? For most flight sim users, an extra 10 millisecond is barely noticeable. And why I ask this, even though I know, like I fly with 120 FPS, so I experience somewhere around 8.33, I'm assuming. And I have never noticed lag on my controls, never. Like I cannot tell if VSync is on or off. I can tell from the amount of screen tearing and jittering that I'm getting, but I cannot tell from the input lag whether VSync is on or off. It is just not perceivable. So when someone comments on my video saying that I get a ton of input lag, dude, like I don't know what you mean. These are the numbers right here. Definitely don't understand how a 10 millisecond input lag is noticeable for anyone. So you see how maybe I'm missing something here, maybe. But even at like I've tried running my monitor at 60 hertz, and I've tried locking my FPS to 30 FPS and then 2xing it to 60 and turning VSync on and off. I still do not notice input lag. So in this table, if you look, that is this setup right here. So you can tell me that, oh, I have a 5090 and 9950 X3D, and that's why you can say all this. No, I tried this exact setup, this first line here, and I could not notice any input lag. Where you would notice input lag though is competitive FPS games, where things are moving extremely fast, you know, something like COD. Right? So look at this, even large changes, 30 to 50 millisecond are often very hard to detect because the flight sim is a really slow moving game, or a slow moving sim, whatever you call it, right? But yeah, that's something I wanted to cover first. I keep hearing this and it just bugs me that I don't know how you guys notice this kind of small numbers. It has to be some superpowers that you have that you're able to notice, like 8 millisecond, 10 millisecond, 15 millisecond. I personally cannot. So I am calling for turning VSync on in order to get rid of screen tearing and jittering, which you will definitely get if you don't have VSync on. And I'll prove that to you. I have a video right at the end. Left will be VSync off and right will be VSync on. You'll see how much different that is. And before you again comment on my hardware, that video is going to be with this setup, okay? With 60 hertz, 60 FPS, locked, VSync on versus VSync off. So that should tell you something. Now another question that I keep getting is, oh, why not turn G-Sync on? Well, G-Sync causes a ton of stutters for me. I've told this in other videos as well. G-Sync causes a ton of stutters for me, and it is just not stable. So it's better for me to turn off G-Sync, fix my monitor's refresh rate to 120 Hz, fix my base frames to 40 FPS, multiply that 40 FPS by 3 to get 120 FPS, which equates to my monitor refresh rate, and then turn VSync on so that I don't get any tearing, any jittering. That's my secret to getting a smooth sim. And it doesn't have to be my hardware to get a smooth sim. You can do the same setup at 100 Hz. You can do the same setup at 90 Hz, 75, 60. Even 60 Hz, 60 FPS looks really good. So you don't need a 5090, you don't need a 9950 X3D to get a smooth sim. Okay, so now let's look at the video footage and I'll talk over that. Alright, now coming to the side-by-side footage comparison. Now, observe VSync off first and then focus on VSync on. Okay, again, running the same setup, 60, my base frames are locked to 30. So a lot of medium-end systems should be able to get this kind of smoothness. Now, if you just focus on VSync off, look at how jittery that panning is. You see how jittery that panning is, and then compare the same thing to the panning that I'm doing on VSync on case. Everything else is the exact same, okay? Do you see that difference? And one of the other difference that my video is not even capturing is screen tearing. I get insane amount of screen tearing with VSync off. Look at that. Look at how jittery this left side footage is. And even though I'm moving with the almost same aggression on the right, you don't see the same kind of jitteriness on the right. Now, of course, you can 3x and run it at 90 FPS and that'll be even smoother, but this is already pretty good. And even medium end systems should be able to do this. So yeah, screen tearing and jittering is what VSync solves. And the trade-off is a little bit of latency, which is not even noticeable. So it sounds like a total no-brainer to me. Anyway, thank you guys for watching the video. I will see you guys on the next one. As always, please like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. And it also helps me stay motivated to bring you these kind of helpful videos. If you want to correct me on something, feel free to comment down below. I'm a really good learner, so I'll listen to you if you know your stuff, and we'll learn together. So thank you again for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next video.